What's going on, PGM fam? Welcome back to another episode with the Powerful Growth Mindset. We're here with another very special guest in the building, Mr. Stanley Fritz. Now, Stanley is the son of immigrant parents. He's also has a huge interest in politics and a flair for social justice. He's a graduate of Old Westbury University, where he actually began community organizing and issuing advocacy across criminal justice reform and democracy. But he also has a newsletter known Let's Not Be Trash, which of course we're going to spend some time deep diving that today. And a lot of the conversation that we're going to have is centered around politics and as well as masculinity. But Stanley, we're excited to have you, man. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Really happy to talk to both of you today.
Yeah, man. So we usually like to address, we're going to start off with the mental health check-in, but before we dive into that, I have to ask you, because I know you a music lover, and we also took a look at your website. Drake or Kendrick, man, who won the battle?
Come on, man. That's easy.
If he say anything but Kendrick.
Listen, Kendrick listen.
Okay. All right. We may continue. Okay.
I heard Beat the Grams one time. I will never listen to it again. That song is nasty work.
Yeah.
So was Family Matters. But if you're talking about rap, bar for bar, versatility, Kendrick, not like us. He gave a history lesson while booty shaking was happening. Come on.
I like to say the way I like to view it is Kendrick kind of humbled Drake in a very adult-like manner. That's the way I like to look at
respectfully
it.
Put, yes.
Respectfully put. Yeah. But that last track that Drake can't respond from that, at least from my perspective. Like, there's nothing else to do. Like, wash your hands with it, say it what it is. Like, it's over.
Yeah. I mean, what do you say? Like, people are dancing to you being a pedophile. You got to just get
low. Bro, that's not cool. That's
And his response was, I didn't like Millie Bobby Brown. I was like, no one said that.
Nobody said that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right, man. Well, again, welcome to the show. And I know we're gonna hop into some of these topics a little bit later, but you know, Mike and I love to start the conversation off, especially with the mental health check-in, and especially for Black men, we don't check in with each other that often. So really, man, we want to start off the show with asking you, man, how you doing spiritually, physically, emotionally? Like, how are things going for you?
Physically, I'm getting back into shape now. I had to stop working out for a couple of months, but I did a 10K last month. I'm doing a century bike ride next month. So good. Okay. Emotionally, I'm whelmed. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not underwhelmed. I'm just whelmed, which like I think is good to be just there. Mentally, my brain is buzzing, got lots of ideas. So, you know, when you're in those moments, I want to stay whelmed emotionally as much as I can, not too high, not too low. And I love when I feel like I'm in my creative zone where I'm reading a bunch of books, watched a bunch of documentaries, doing a lot of writing. So right now I feel like pretty good.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And I, you know, you just touched on you getting back into shape, but you did a 10K last month and you're doing a century bike ride. Man, just join me I do triathlons, so you can always come and join me.
I got a weight problem, man. I can't wait to eat. So I got like the 10K, like I've been running for like the last 3 years. So even if I for a little bit, I can bust out a quick 5.6 or 6 mile real quick. It'll be slow, but it'll get done.
For sure. Well, hey man, you to me, you in shape. So, but I hear you. There's levels to this. But man, we've been reading up on you, and I know we're gonna dive into the newsletter. But just looking at your background and your career, man, you've got a pretty eclectic background, especially when it comes to the work and the things that you're promoting. So, you know, we want to start this episode off. We want to start things off by asking you, you know, you mentioned that you have a policy background, but now it looks like you're advocating, you're talking through a lot of different things. Yeah. So I want to start this off by asking you, like, what instilled that passion? What inspired you to get started? I know that this has been something that you've been doing the last few years, but where did this all come from?
That's a really good question. I will give you a quick answer, then a longer answer.
Sure.
The quick answer is I truly believe that I and a lot of people who do advocacy and policy work, we're just trying to save the version of us who didn't get saved when we were kids. That's the quick answer. I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn in the 90s, burnt out buildings, crack vials everywhere. And, you know, I was talking to my therapist actually today, and I was talking about how like so much of my upbringing was about like fear and anger and anxiety, like having to be hyper vigilant. And I remember when I was 16, I was living in Brownsville in Tilton Houses, projects in Brooklyn. And I was going to school and I came down the stairs because the elevator always broke. And to the left of me was a pile of garbage up to my waist. And then to the right of me was a pile of dirty snow up to my waist. It was June. And like the air smelled like crack and gunpowder. And like, I'm not exaggerating. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this can't be it. Like, we can't just live like this. And I thought the only way I could change it, change my environment or change that, was to have power. At the time, I thought power was becoming an elected official and like, getting closer, increasing my proximity to whiteness so I can get money and get away from that. But, you read enough books, you go around enough people, like my politics shifted. And I saw that it was about capitalism, it was about white supremacy, it was about patriarchy, right? It was about racial capitalism. And understanding those things have really shifted the way that I look at the world and what I'm trying to bring into it.
You said a lot there. So you mentioned you mentioned that it started with power, right? Yeah. And as you kind of look at your childhood, and even now as an adult, when you look at your experience from, starting thinking like I need power, but now thinking like, hey, like I can advocate. I think from what it sounded like, you can advocate a little bit more on a local front or on, be a little bit more impactful. Like, what are some of those things that as you've kind of climbed the ranks and got involved in, like, how has that kind of shaped your perspective? But also when you start thinking about impact, right? Like we always hear, like you can start locally on a local scale, or you could start on a small scale. Like, how do you, I guess my question is like, how do folks start? Because I feel like that's one of the things that a lot of folks are always questioning.
All politics is local, and politics is a contact sport. And people think you got to be at the federal level to mix it up. But really, the federal level, the least amount of things happen. And you can shift an entire neighborhood by joining the school board or the community board or the alderman office or what have you. To me, power was the ability to move things or move people in the direction you wanted. And I thought to have power, you had to be white or you had to have money. So if you weren't white and you didn't have money, you had to increase your proximity to them. And as a Black person, I thought that meant you had to perform. That shifted as like my political analysis expanded. And I realized that first off, we all have power. And the trick that capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy does is it tells you, Black person, person of color, woman, queer person, that you do not have any power or you shouldn't say anything. And when the truth is, we're all the change we've been looking for. And we are the strongest when we connect together. So I realized that if I could find a way to get all these people, like get Miss Johnson from down the block, get Jerome at the basketball court, get Tayshawn who's hustling on the corner, and be like, yo, we all have a problem with the mold on the wall. We know it's an issue. We know how to solve it. What are you going to do about it? If I get us together and we also make a noise about it, we can make change. And I just kept amplifying it. And I didn't know I was doing that. It just kept being like, the more people you enroll, the more people saw their own power, the more questions we asked, the more we had to get creative about ways to shift people. And, I went from like being somebody who was a campus organizer to a community organizer. And then I kept getting into rooms because we kept building power. And all of a sudden it was like, well, actually, you've been doing this. Here's another way you can move things and shift things. And then before you know it, I'm like helping to move big policy in, New York State. And, like here I am now, like helping other people figure out how to do that. But it all started from just like understanding that like ordinary people have extraordinary power, but we're told that we have nothing. So you got to change the narrative.
I love that. So one thing that came to mind when you were speaking was, a lot of people, kind of get in where you fit in a sense. And when it comes to community, sometimes people feel like they don't have a voice, right? And, one thing that I oftentimes I hear people say is, well, that's not my role. And my role is more so to kind of just share a message, right? And that's all I can do. But how do you encourage people, and what words of encouragement do you give people who don't mind getting their hands dirty, rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty and actually participating and doing what they need to? Because I do believe where everyone is not meant to be the leader in organizing, everyone is not meant to be the voice of the group. Everyone is not meant to do certain things. However, you do have a part, and you can do it from a place where it comes from your core, and you're able to still affect meaningful change?
Do it the way that you feel the most comfortable. There's space for everybody in the movement. When I was organizing this Oracle Citizen Action, we had a upstate New York, for those who don't live in New York, it's a park called Kingston and around central New York. And there was this one woman who she didn't feel comfortable going to marches. She had a full-time job and she had kids, so she couldn't really come out a lot. So she would cook meals for all of our meetings. And she would just pull up with a bucket full of chicken and be like, here you go, some soda, some juice, and dip. And that's all she did. But that was her contribution. And because of that, we could bring 40 people into the office to drive calls to the state senator and tell him he had to support an increase in the minimum wage. And we won that. We got the minimum wage increase at $15 an hour. And I promise you, that chicken that Ms. Johnson was making helped to fuel a bunch of those calls.
So how do you carry on when you get knocked down?
I mean, life is about pain management. You're going to get knocked down.
Absolutely.
But what do you learn? And that's why it's important to have a power analysis, right? Because we all have individual power, but we're going up against a system that has like a collective agreement within like the world where like, you know, up is down, left is right. So you're having to shift the narrative and push for things. And they have money. And they have lots of money. So you're fighting against that. So there'll be times where like you didn't build enough power to get the money. So it's like, all right, we lost this time. Where do we fall short? How do we build that? How do we shift? Who do we need to be? And you do it in a community, and you do it through accountability, and you do it through truth, love, and justice.
I love that. Would you say, based on your experience, when we use the term power, what does that encompass? Like sometimes some people may feel like power could go back to money, and kind of like to your definition at the beginning. Can you speak to us a little bit about that? How your definition of power have shifted?
So, I mean, the definition of power hasn't shifted. Power is an agnostic thing. It's what you do with the power, right? And there's multiple forms of power. So there's financial power. There's institutional power. There's narrative power. So, for example, there's a dominant narrative in the U.S. that, you know, people pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and they did it all by themselves. Now, intellectually, especially as Black people and people of color, we know that's not true. It takes a community, but that is the narrative. There is collective power, which is the power that I used to organize, right? If I want to get a bill passed, I'm pulling up with 500 constituents saying, do this thing, because electors care about money and votes. And they need money so they can pay for votes. So if I got 500 voters saying, stop playing with me, they're going to listen, right? Then there's like military power. So the NYPD, the military industrial complex, right? Where they use force. So you got to understand what power exists and also understand what power you have and what you need.
I think as you were talking, one of the things that kind of comes to mind is, and again, we're not going to get too political, but as we kind of move into
get political, man.
No, what I want to say, what I want to say is we're moving into an election year. Well, we are in an election year, and you hear this term, especially with millennials and Gen Z. Even you've got voters who are a little bit older as well, saying, well, like, you know, we compare both candidates, like it is what it is. Or you hear things like, oh, well, you know, my vote doesn't matter, or, hey, my voice doesn't matter. What do you, as we kind of move into this season, right? What do you, and I guess my question is, how do you encourage the folks, especially in this community? Because like, you know, you talked a lot about a local policy, and I agree with you. I think that there's I'm not going to speak for everybody on this call, but I think a lot of people would agree with you in the sense that, you know, a lot of the change that really gets affected is on a local scale, but there's also funding that does come from a national scale as well. So I guess my question to you is, as we're moving into this election, how are you encouraging folks in your community? How are you encouraging folks who are like, hey, my voice doesn't matter here, or, you know what, it takes a collective, but we're not going to want to organize? Like, what do you tell folks like that? Because I think that all too often we run into this in an election cycle, but I feel like we're also at a point now where we're kind of looking around and it's like, is this all we got right now? Like, is this all we got as a country? So I'm curious, like, how are you thinking about that right now?
I mean, we got 269 guys running for president. It's nasty out here. But the fact of the matter is, when you're talking about power, the power that we have is our collective power. That's all we got. You do not leave power at the table. You never do. because power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and never will, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if you feel like, damn, both these people are bad, there's two things you need to understand. I have a lot of issues with Joe Biden. I'm disgusted with what's happening in Palestine and what my tax dollars are paying for. But I understand that one person, Joe Biden, is deeply problematic and shouldn't be president anymore, but he's our only option. And with him, we can organize through a semblance of a democracy. Mm-hmm. And the other person, Trump, is trying to destroy the democracy, which means you no longer have any levers to fight. And once you have no levers to fight, then we have truly reached the end of democracy. And that puts the most vulnerable people in danger. And not just like Black and brown folks, white folks as well. But the thing we know to be true is when white folks get a cold, BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, we get the fever or the flu or COVID. So it's really important to make sure that, like, you're speaking up. Then additionally, if your voice didn't matter, they wouldn't be fighting so hard to A, silence it, and B, like, stop you from being able to vote. Like, votes mean something. That's why when they were doing a recount back in 2018 in Florida, when it was Andrew Gillum versus Ron DeSantis, they were finding ballots for Al Gore. You know why? Because they went and hid those joints because they did not want Al Gore to win the election. They didn't want Andrew Gillum to win the election. They're hiding votes. That's why, and I think it is New Orleans, the Supreme Court just forced them to recreate 2 Black districts because they were trying to erase Black districts because Black voting blocks undermine certain agendas. So your voice does matter, but they've done a really good job of gaslighting you into thinking you don't have any power. You got the gun in your hand, your fingers on the trigger, the bullets are in there, and you sitting here like, what am I going to do? Pull it, beloved.
I love where we're headed with the episode and the dialogue that we're having. And which brings me to a point where what you said is so spot on. Like, our voices do matter. And because if it didn't, they wouldn't try to suppress it. And every angle, they wouldn't try to attack our voices, and regardless of the initiative, right? So can you speak to us about that? And kind of back to Candy's point, because I do believe that a lot of people say Gen Z, like they're just lost, but I have some hope. I have a little bit of hope because many of them, they have that boldness that a lot of millennials oftentimes lack. And I wonder if you can speak to the forever evolving society that we live in. What are some critical things that we need to be aware of as we're navigating this upcoming election and also future elections, and just more so creating opportunities for Black people to just be able to get in positions of power?
So Gen Z, they're brilliant. They see the world differently from us, though, because they came into the world in a different context. When I was graduating from college, the world was collapsing, and a Black man with a funny name was being elected president. And they were talking about a post-racial America. These kids went to college or went to high school, and you couldn't go outside because outside might get you sick. And you couldn't stand 6 feet away from somebody because you might get sick. And all of our institutions have fumbled. So they're a lot more pessimistic. But because they see the world in a different context, they have different ideas, which can make us better. Just like when Gen X was looking at us crazy as millennials, we had different ideas and different expectations, which made things better. So we can learn a lot from Gen Z. Gen Z can learn a lot from us. And what we have to do is create the space where folks can be organized and they can see their own power. But then Gen Z has to listen, just like we do. That's possible because this is an argument that generations have had every single generation. But my favorite organizer, Ella Baker, when Martin Luther King and those folks looking at SNCC saying, why y'all over here organizing, doing these protests, sitting in these restaurants, it's not going to do anything but piss people off. Ella Baker said, nah, why do you want to do this? Explain to me the strategy. What's the outcome you want from this? Oh, that's the outcome you want? Bet. Here's how you build power. Here's how you get allyship. Like, she did that. So who in our generation is going to be the Ella Baker for Gen Z?
Ooh. So it brings me to this question, man. I love that. So, we live in a society where gender norms and gender roles are a common trend, right? And it brings me to the men are trash, right? So you speak about that, and I wonder, how is that compared to, can you speak more about, I guess, what that means for you, that phrase? as well as how it connects to oftentimes the gender norms and the gender expectations that are given to men, who are sometimes told that they have to be the men of the house, they have to lead, they have to do all these things. Do you mind speaking to that?
Oh yeah. So let's not be trash. We did that. So quick story to answer the question. A friend of mine was in a situation where she was dating someone who was abusive, and like it really opened my eyes to how like I could have very easily been this guy. We were very similar. And I was asking myself, like, what was the difference between him and me? So I put these workshops together for men to talk about it. And then the host did this training called the Man Box. And at the end of it, we was like, yo, we wish we could do more, but I couldn't afford to keep paying him to do this. And then somebody was like, I wish there was like a website where we could talk about not being trash. And I was like, word, let's not be trash. And I have a habit of, if I hear something that sounds like a good domain name, I will buy it. Time GoDaddy had a sale for domain names for $1. So I bought Let's Not Be Trash.
And what you do with it?
I turned it into a website, and then me and my boy Evan, we were like, yo, like we're gonna talk to men about patriarchy and sexism, but in a way that isn't a TED talk. Because men are not trash. We're not. But there's this idea that we are, right? And like, let's be honest, if we're talking about a league of like not being the best human being, men might be the Michael Jordan of that league right now. But we got to talk about like why is that happening? And is it because men inherently are bad people, or because society has created expectations and pushed men into a corner or a box so that like we are living up to a certain standard? And now the world is changing, and everybody's like, oh, men are trash, you doing this, you doing that. And it's like, but hold on, you told me I had to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and I'm doing that, and now I'm wrong. You told me I had to move this way. Or you told me I had to like be the breadwinner, and I can't afford to pay my cell phone bill right now. And you're calling me broke. So how do we hold space for men who are going through this and who are trying to find new ways of masculinity while also then having their manhood attacked, right? So how do we hold space for them while also showing some of the guys who like they're stuck on that plot of like, this is what manhood is and everyone else is wrong, while showing them, yo, bro, like this ain't the best way. So for me, I decided that my writing style was going to be inspired by Jay-Z. Hov did that, so hopefully you wouldn't go through that. So when I try to unpack these issues, I try to center myself in my mistakes and then share the lessons. So, you know, nobody's trash and we're all trash. We're going to try not to be.
Talk to me this then. Talk to me in a way where you're able to break this down. Because I know for me, you know, as a therapist, that's the population that I focus on, is working with men of color. And some of the common trends and themes that I oftentimes hear is I don't, it's like they're asking, how do I free myself from myself? And the question that I ask them is, how do you? Who are you? And what are you subscribing to, and who have you in this corner? And so, you know, I want you, if you don't mind, to just speak a little bit more about this topic a little bit, because I know me and Gandhi, we have talked about this somewhat, you know, like sometimes living in a society where we are oftentimes ostracized for even just being vocal about certain things, or just like, for example, what's going on between Diddy and Cassie. You know, sometimes if you share a unpopular opinion, then you're oftentimes ostracized, and you're sometimes put on an island to the point where people don't really necessarily understand your point of view, but it wasn't the common or popular point of view. So I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit more about that.
I mean, we got to create safe spaces for men. And I know people might hear that and roll their eyes.
Yeah.
And it's particularly because of what you're talking about, and because of the comment that, like, you know, some of your folks have said of like, how do I save myself, or how do I escape myself from myself?
How do I free myself from myself?
Yeah. Like, how do you free yourself from yourself? So that's a good question, because it's like you've been living life a certain way that society told you to live. And then one day it's like, oh, you've been oppressed. Oh, I have? Like, I didn't see the change. So now you have to like go back and recalibrate to figure out how, and then also recalibrate how you've been oppressing other people, all of that stuff, and then shift. But guess what? There's no roadmap for it. So that's why we need to save space, because we need to be able to unpack and decompress stuff in a real way. That's why any man, I really encourage you to journal. I got a million journals for everything. You can get guided journals. I have a poetry book now where I write corny raps, but it really helps me, right? Because that sometimes it's the only place that you can like unpack your feelings without judgment. Get a therapist. I started therapy in 2021. Same thing. Like we need to do that. So those things need to happen. And we also need to understand the fact that like, if men are going to shift, we have to see our liberation tied to breaking these cycles. And the world has to acknowledge that unhealthy cycles exist. And those cycles are from the man box, right? And the man box has a couple of things, right? So when you were growing up, we can do this together if you guys don't mind. What are some things you were told you had to be as a man? I'll go first since I started it. I remember when I was like 4 years old and one of my father's friends, her brother was beating me up and I was crying. And then the woman went to go stop him and he's like, yo, like he a man, he gotta learn how to be tough. And I remember 4 years old going, oh, all right, I gotta go. So like I had to get normalized to violence and I thought men had to be violent. That was one thing I thought I had to be. What about you guys?
I would say for me, I was told being that I grew up with my grandmother, I was the man of the house. And that was like a responsibility that I felt like I had to carry, even though financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, I wasn't able to carry that weight. But to prove a point, I felt like that was something I had to do.
I think mine would actually add on to that as well. But more so, I remember growing up hearing the statement like, your responsibility as a man is to bring money home. You're supposed to take care of the family and like, that's it. And then when it comes to like that expression of, you know, loving something or showing any type of emotion, it would be something that would be dwindled. And so that, of course, that perspective has changed, but that would be one of the examples that I've experienced.
Yeah. Another one, and like it took a lot, I'm still working on this, is like, men, why are you crying for? I essentially got trained not to feel, and I mastered it at one point. Well, no, because no one can master it, but I mastered disassociating from my physical and emotional and my mental, emotional emotions. And a lot of men have. So now we listed a couple of things in the man box. For the gentlemen listening, I would encourage you guys to think of stuff to add to it, right? And then, now let me ask you something. What happened when you were unable to live up to those expectations? How did that make you feel?
Anxious, depressed,
Like a failure.
Failure. Shoot, I remember actually crying. Like, but that was after I got more in tune with my emotions. But yes.
I would even go back to angry, man. Like it was just like I failed. And then like that anger just kept like when I was trying to carry the emotional weight for my grandma, it was just like, oh, I'm seeing her go through this. And it creates a level of anger that when, you know, for me, when I was going to school, when I was going to different things and people are like, why are you always angry or aggressive? I'm just like, you know, I don't know. But as I look back and reflect over those experiences, I'm just like, yo, I was put in a role that I didn't ask to be in. And I wasn't even ready to be in.
Now, like, I can fairly assume the three of us have like done some work, so we process this. Imagine you haven't done that work, but you got told this things you had to be, and you trying your best to be it. Now all of a sudden you're getting called trash, and you're hearing men deserve less, and you getting called broke, and like all these things, and you hearing like all these rules you worked so hard to master, and you starting to figure some of it out. Now all of a sudden it's wrong. How would you feel?
Incomplete.
Robbed.
That too.
Yeah. Right. And then now let's add one more curveball to this, right? Because this is something that I've gone through. So all that happened, but you handling it, right? You standing 10 toes down like a real man, quote unquote. Now you trying to engage in the things that like the world is telling you to do. Be more open. Say how you feel. And you with your partner, someone you trust, and you say, yo, that really hurt my feelings. And now you're getting called sensitive, or soft, or weak. That's a space that like men are existing in. And that doesn't apologize or like make it okay for the bad things that like I or any other man has done or the poor ways that we've shown up. But like this is the world that we're existing in. And let's not be trash. I'm hoping, right? It's like we can talk about these things, we can give a roadmap, we can process these things because we need to be better, not just for women. Yes, definitely for women, right? 1 in 3 women will be victims of intimate partner violence. Number 2 killer of Black women between the ages 15 and 30 is black men, right? But that's crazy. We gotta reduce that significantly, but we gotta do it for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so, this is my small way of trying to be the change I want to see.
Absolutely. And before you ask that question, what you saying is valued in this space, because this is why the platform was created. So I wonder if you can share with us, outside of Let's Not Be Trash, what other avenues and opportunities have you been able to be a part of and are a part of to help in this cycle or this mindset that many people are in about men, or have this false ideology that men are XYZ, and that's like an unrealistic expectation.
I mean, honestly, Let's Not Be Trash has been a place that I've had it. I haven't had like many other opportunities yet. I mean, some of it is me because like I feel like I'm not an expert. I'm just a nigga who cares and is trying, right? And like the other piece of it is, up until this last year, the job I had before the one I have now, I essentially was tying my value to my work and was working all the time. So this is the first year where I've had a healthy relationship with work. And that's another thing men tend to do is like, you ain't a man if you want to have a job, you ain't a man if you don't work yourself to the bone. So this has been my healthiest year of like work-life balance. So I'm starting to build out what my life outside of work looks like. So I want to add that in there. I don't know how yet.
Can we, before I got another question, but I got another one on this. I guess you made the point of like, and I think we all kind of experience this as men, but like working ourselves to the bone. And now you said you're in a year where like you have a little bit of balance. Can you talk us through what your process was like, especially trying to create some of that balance? Because I know me personally, like I'm one of those folks who can go, 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 go. And then, you get to the point of exhaustion and then it's like, I'm not talking to nobody. I'm not doing nothing. And that's not a healthy cycle. Like, you're going to have peaks and you're going to have valleys as well. But I'm curious from your own process, like, what did you do or what guardrails did you put in place to ensure that you have a space that's going to allow you to have a little bit more flexibility?
I mean, I crashed out first. The shutdown was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me because I was depressed that whole time and I didn't know it. I was even depressed 2021, 2022. Like going through therapy really helped me see that and like also get through it. But and some resentment. I was at the job, I had been there for a long time, and like the relationship was deteriorating because it was just not a good place for me anymore or for them. And I remember I had committed to staying one more year to help them with some projects. But I was like, I'm not going ham no more. I'm just gonna work 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, and that's it. And I started off in spite, but then I like after about a month, I'm like, yo, this is cool. Like, I'm home. I don't have anything to do. Like, I can go chill. I can play video games. And it went from like being a thing I did out of spite to like being a thing I'm like, I can't give this up. So once I had that, then it was like, well, how do I keep it? So I have a journal. I wrote a promise to myself of like, Stanley, like, this is what I want your days to look like, right? I want to work from home 2 days a week. Those days I'm going to work out, I'm going to journal, and I'm going to get some work done, but I'm not going to like work the whole day. I'm not going to work any later than past 6 o'clock unless it's an emergency. And if I do that, I'm going to get my get back later. When I go to the office, I'm going to lock in so I can be out by 5. Right? And I'm only going to work on the weekends when absolutely necessary. And I set those parameters. And when I was interviewing, I was pretty clear that like, listen, I'm happy to go hard when necessary, but like, I'm not trying to be in a place where you need to prove your worth by working to the bone. And they were like, well, no, because we like our lives and we get paid well here. I'm not worried about that.
Hey, that's the place. Hey, I mean, I'm the type of person where I don't dream of labor, but at the same time, I don't want to be in an environment where that's the norm or the expectation, because one thing I do believe in is your environments matter. And that's something that I learned from one of my mentors. And, Gandhi, that's where I'm at right now in my season, where I'm leaving where I'm at because I know my season had expired. But when I checked out in October, and it wasn't because I was just like, yes, it was because I don't want to be here no more. It was that. But when I completely checked out and I'm not gonna say I stopped caring, but the level of my output began to mirror just what my job description was. I felt the sense of relief, and I wasn't I didn't allow myself to go back into a cycle where I had to prove my worth, because I've been here 7 years. And at this point, I've proven myself to be a team player. I've proven myself to love kids. Now I've proven myself to be about what I'm saying I'm about. And so I 100% agree with you. And whoever's not in that space, I encourage you to get in that space. And if you need to know how to get in that space, you might want to talk to one of us, because at the end of the day, man, they will post your funeral date before they will have your job posted date before your funeral date. I think that's how the saying goes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, that's real. We had, well, I won't speak on this, but spoke to somebody recently and they said the same thing, Mike, where it's like, hey, you can go as hard as you want to, but if you croak out, just know your job is going to be posted the next day.
The same day. Because the clock must continue, right?
Mm-hmm. That's real. So Stanley, I want to ask you, man, as an advocate for mental health, as an advocate for ensuring that we as men are appreciated, and I'm going to say appreciated because I feel like that's not how it is in society right now. But as an advocate for this, how would you encourage society? And I know that we talked a little bit earlier about like we need to have more spaces like this, but society doesn't offer that. So I guess from your perspective, what can folks in society, our listeners, the women, the teenagers, the folks whoever is going to be sitting and listening to this, like how can they be an advocate or an ally in this space as we continue to grow and shift as a society?
I'm gonna give you the advice my therapist gave me when we first started meeting. Where he was like, talk softly to yourself. Because I was complaining about how at work I have been getting complaints that like they said I was being like condescending. And I'm like, I'm just asking them questions. And he's like, how do you talk to yourself when you're frustrated? And I told him, he was like, the way you talk to yourself is how you talk to other people. And I realized I'm brutal to myself and I feel like I'm not delivering. So talk softly to yourself first, right? Love on yourself first, and then reflect that to the people in your life, particularly the men in your life. Make sure you have the emotional space for it. But if you do, hold space, because I wrote one of my corny raps the other day off of the beat from J. Cole's song "Let Go of My Hand."
Yeah.
And then I said in the poem, I was like, I'm just a boy cosplaying as a man, right? That's what we're all children cosplaying as adults. No one knows how to do this, right? And that doesn't erase where we fall short. We should be accountable, but we're all figuring it out. So remember that when somebody says something ridiculous or does something dumb, like you probably have too. I know I have. I used to think gunpoint was a place. Like, so if I could think that and I was clean to read all these books, like anybody can do anything. So hold that space. And also while you're holding that space, don't be afraid to be like, this is not right. And I'm telling you because I love you. Because I think a lot of men, we feel like love for men is qualified based on whether you could produce something or you have power. And if you don't have that, you don't have love. And one of the most powerful things somebody ever told me was when I was doing this radio show, and one of the hosts would call it and he would say, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. I think a lot more men need to hear that and to know that people mean it.
That really resonates with me, man. I will say to the folks here on this, and we got
crazy. That's crazy.
What you mean?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say
because what you about to do was literally what I was about to say.
I just like Stanley, we talked on a lot, man, and for me, you saying that, I want to say this to not only this audience, but really right here, right now, for between you and Mike, man, I really do love and appreciate y'all in this conversation, because I don't think that we say it enough as men, as you kind of pointed out, but also just having a space on this Monday evening to just talk, whether it's on the Kendrick Cole stuff, but also just having a space to just reflect and just be open with one another. So I just love you, man. I appreciate you. Mike, it's the same thing. It's always love, and I appreciate you. So Stanley, thank you for opening that up, man.
Thank you. Love you too. Nothing y'all can do about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I love
Yeah, I
that. Like,
love
it's such a
that.
powerful thing to say, because it's just like, you love me in spite of me. I love you because of you, beloved.
Mm. I love this topic, and one reason why I say that is because, you know, I'm all about, I believe in the value of breaking like curses and broken mindsets, or hurt mindsets, shall I say, or uninformed. But you know, being able to be in a space where you say you love another man without having to question their sexuality, with the work that you do, and also the spaces that you have been in, how do you go about challenging one perspective as it relates to masculinity from old head as to compared to a Gen Zer and a millennial? Because everyone, they're on a different spectrum, right? From baby boomer all the way down to a Gen Z. Like my dad, he may not get away with saying I love you, right? And so he was like, man, you better go ahead with that, man. And so, like, can you speak to us about that? Because that's a real thing, right? And for me, I'm just like, yo, that's toxic masculinity. Like, man, yo, who, like, lean into that. Let's talk about that a little bit. But talk to us about that if you don't mind.
I'm still figuring it out. I got my dad. My dad's like an old school Caribbean man, 77 years old. Like, I
Yeah.
got, when I tell you I have so many siblings across the Caribbean, I would not date any woman who said she was anywhere from Haiti, Trinidad, Jamaica, Grenada, nowhere. Because it's too dangerous. You might be related. But one of the things like I try to do to like to show my love and affection to other men, particularly in ways that they can be digestible, is another thing I do. I stole this line from Fabulous. I fuck with you the long way. And like, for me, I'm still telling you I love you, but it's, you know, has a little more edge to it. Like, my partner, she's a little thug, so I'll say that to her sometimes, because, like, you know, when I tell her I love her, it makes her feel too warm and fuzzy. So she's like, nah, I'm from Harlem. So I'm like, oh, my bad. I fuck with you the long way. So I do that with other men as well. Like, yo, like, I fuck with you the long way. Like, you know, I'm with you hard body, to use some
Right.
New York lingo. And then I try to model my behavior. I think I think most men of a certain age who meet me at first, they're like, this dude's a little weird. And then, you know, I hope what happens, like, for example, I don't know if you guys know the rapper My Son Lennon.
Nah.
Nope.
My Son's really solid dude. Does a lot of like activist work with Tamika Mallory. And I met him through, like, when I was doing some volunteer work with the Gathering for Justice, which is Harry Belafonte's organization, rest in peace. And I remember when My Son first met me, he's a dude from the Bronx, like, really kids was a hard dude. And I'm over here like, oh yeah, man, that Taylor Swift album was kind of cool. And I was like, you know, like, just chilling, like, I'm chilling with the women, chilling with the men, like, chilling with gay people, straight people. And I remember after a while, he's like, yo, Stan, like, I thought you was a little weird at first, but like, you really 10 toes down. Because most people put all the labels away, put all the ideas away, the contracts away. What they care about are people who are real, who are authentic, people who do what they say and say what they'll do, and people who are consistent. Right? And I think because I showed up that way, like, me and Mice had some conversations where, like, I think I helped to, like, you know, like, give him a different perspective. And if you know Mice, like, he is an advocate for all people. And he's that way because, like, he doesn't care about titles or roles or pronouns. He cares about, like, people. So, you know, I think you can hold that space for people if you just show up as who you are and you try to just, like, lead by example, and folks respond to it.
I love that.
I love that, man.
I love
So I know we have a few minutes left, and Stanley, we want to transition for a second. We love to ask folks when we get to the end of an episode a question that's a little off the wall, and we want to get your perspective on this. But the question is, would you rather continually embrace challenges and potential setbacks, or would you rather consistently avoid challenges to maintain a more predictable and comfortable life?
You can't grow if you're stagnant. You know, life is hard, but you can appreciate the beauty in life because you've gone through struggles. You can appreciate the win because you failed. I can appreciate the Knicks playing in the playoffs this year because I remember Latina was our starting point guard, and we won 17 games out of 82. All right. I want to keep growing. I want to keep I want to hit my second win when I'm 80, to quote Andre 3000. Like, so I'm going to take the growth through the struggle every day. And I'm going to complain about it too, but I'm going to take it.
Come on now. We all got it. Hey, as my dad always puts it, you can complain, but it's still got to get done. So what you going to do about it?
Exactly.
Well, man, we appreciate you, man. This has been a fruitful episode, not only just with the gems that you've dropped, but I know at least how I've taken away from it. Above all things, man, I love both of y'all, and there's nothing that I can do about it.
You
But
don't love me. I think I love it.
That's a classic.
Come on now. Come on now.
And teacher broke my heart in college. That was the jam.
but for real, man, you've I know I've tapped into some of your writing and have gotten to see what you've been putting out. But for the folks in the audience who are going to be listening to this episode, how can they tap in with you, whether it's on social media or even more so, read up on some of the content that you've been putting out? How can folks get in touch with you?
All right. So on social media, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads with the same name, Stanfritz, STANFRITZ. I'm real active on Twitter because I've been there since 2008, and so I don't know how to let go. IG, I mostly post memes, and Threads, I'm here and there. But if you want to read the writing, you can find me at Let's Not Be Trash. That's Let's, LETS, not NOT, B, just the letter B, trash. And if you want to find something to kind of get you started with me, check out the post I wrote a couple years ago called Your Pipe Game Might Be Trash. And it's essentially...
Yo, this man tweaking, bro.
Oh, man.
It's
oh, wow.
It's essentially a post about, like, well, I'll say this. Like I said, Hov did that, so hopefully you wouldn't go through that. And I essentially talk about one time that I gave some low-tier pipe, right? And like what I learned about myself and what you can learn without having to slang low-tier pipe. Okay? Wow. Sometimes your thing ain't thing, and it's because of toxic masculinity. So yeah, so I try to be funny too, and I always include music.
Hey, did you cry when she tell you that, man?
What you say?
Did you cry when she told you that?
Not, you know what it was? No, because she was like, what she say to me? She was like, it felt like you were trying to accomplish a mission, not please me. And like, she was right. I was thinking about him like up, down, left, right, 1, 2, 3, so you can get the seat. Like, it wasn't.
Oh,
but like, because you don't, when we talk about sex, especially when you're younger, most of the ways you think about sex is through porn or like, oh, I did this and I killed it. But when do we ever start to think, what does she like? What does she want? And you had to be present, and you had to be listening, and you had to be engaged, and you had to be invested 100%. In her pleasure. And a lot of folks aren't. So 100%. You become, jackhammers and grunts.
100%.
So yeah, laugh at me, but learn a lesson.
Hey, I love that, man. Laugh at me, but learn a lesson. Absolutely, absolutely. And go ahead and finish dropping your social media, man. I know I cut you off.
Oh no, that was it. Those are the places I'm at. And obviously the newsletter. Please become a subscriber. I publish every Tuesday. Evan publishes every Monday. If you got a couple of coins, consider being a paid subscriber. We got a $5 a month tier, a $10 a month tier, or you could be a founding member for $350. But like nobody really got money like that. It's a recession somewhere. So whatever you can do, and if you can do nothing, just share it. And even if you can't subscribe as a paid or a free, but you want to read an article, leave a comment, because conversations are important.
Absolutely. Well, Stan, we really appreciate you for being a part of the show. You taught me some things, and one of the things that I really appreciate, and it was like, it's part of J. Cole's song, There's Beauty in the Struggle, right? And no matter what you go through and the different things that, adversity is oftentimes thrown at us, it is our responsibility to heal from that, in a sense, so that we can continue to move forward. But at the same time, we were placed on this earth for a reason. And in that reason, it's up to us to discover what that is and be able to find our lane, to be able to rally to be able to continue to support our community. And for us, and for me, we always say it on our platform, it's the power of a growth mindset. But most importantly, it all starts with you.